Welcome to the CRA Corner podcast. I am Anna Parts.
And I'm Maria Milas, and we're two former CRAs talking all things clinical operations. Thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the CRA Corner. And today, Annalise and I are so excited and looking forward to the conversation because we have a very special guest and we have Theodora Savlovschi here with us. And I'm very excited to speak to Theodora because not only she is a lovely friend, I would say by now, because we've had so many interactions, but also because you have so much experience, Theodora, in hiring, in recruitment, in this specific niche that to many of us CRAs just sounds like a complete unknown, a complete world of we don't know what's happening, what's going on, where's the lack of communication, how is it possible that we have two different perspectives about it? So I really, really want to welcome you to this episode and thank you for joining us.
It's really a pleasure to be here and I really appreciate the invite. Obviously, I love nothing better than talking about CRAs and hiring in the clinical operations space. So I feel, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Maybe, Annalisa, we can start by a quick introduction, right? I don't know how much. I know you know Theodora, but I don't know how much you know about her. So I think maybe we can start with that. Theodora, would you mind giving us a little bit of details on perhaps your journey? How did you become a recruiter? How does one become a recruiter? Or how do you get to do that? And specifically of CRAs, I would love to know.
Yeah, sure. I don't think there is a recruiter on earth that will tell you they grew up wanting to be a recruiter. We will all say we fell into it. I've graduated from a degree of journalism and creative writing, and when I graduated, I was going to different assessment days. One day I went to one thinking I'm going for a media assessment day, media sales assessment day, and it was actually a recruitment assessment day. So I ended up working with a really great recruitment training organization that then placed me in my first position in recruitment. I worked in that company for a little while, and then in the second company for a little while, and then the third company for a little while, for 11 years rather. And then in November, I took the leap and set up my own recruitment company. It was a little bit by chance that I ended up working in clinical operations. The first opportunity I was given as a recruiter, it was primarily because I speak multiple languages. As you know, I'm originally from Romania, and like most Romanians, I speak all the Latin languages. And it was a huge advantage being based in the US. The consultant who trained me in the industry and I was working alongside with at the time was a specialist in clinical operations, primarily within UK and continental Europe. She used to be a CTA herself and then a CTA manager before she entered the recruitment industry. So I always felt that the training she provided me with from a technical perspective was very thorough, and I will be forever grateful for her. I think it really helped me understand the nitty-gritty of it all and demystify some of the jargon. And it was, for my career, she was absolutely instrumental, and I will always be forever grateful to her.
How interesting.
And for your first job in clinical operation, did it go via referrals or did you apply for the first job in clinical operation?
Yeah, initially I was working with the senior consultant who provided me with the training, and she kind of introduced me to a lot of the industry, primarily to do with clinical operations. And it was really one of those things, you know, once you start speaking to CRAs, you start speaking to more CRAs. Once you speaking to CTAs, they obviously recommend more CTAs who want to become CRAs and so on. And so I ended up being, you know, primarily focused on anything to do with clinical operations. And I've placed candidates from entry-level CTA to in-house CRA to remote monitor, to all levels of CRAs all across the world, to ClinOps leads, CTMs, project managers, project directors, all the way up to vice presidents of clinical operations.
And that's for over 11 years, you said, right?
14 and a half years now, nearly 15 years. Yes, I know the moisturizer is working.
I need to know the brand.
Quite a long time. Yeah, so I was with my previous company for 11 years before I set up Vivexa as an independent life sciences recruitment organization in November.
Fantastic. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
It's
early days.
It's so interesting that you've seen also the development of this industry, right? You've seen from recruiting CTAs, CRAs, cleanups, professionals 15 years ago, 14 years ago to today. So here's what I would say, curiosity is. What do you think, what have you seen changing in the industry over, let's say, the last decade? Because so many things have changed in the recruitment market, of CRA recruiting market. I know it must be a very broad question, but does anything come to mind about what has changed the most in the CRA market?
So many things. I think it is, when we look at clinical operations recruitment as a whole, it is a very cyclical industry. So when I entered the industry 2011, 2012, it was very much an employer's market. Then obviously when we kind of reached 2019, 2020, the pandemic hit, 21, 22, we're all in a mad panic hiring. We reached peaks that we've never seen before. And then 23rd, we've seen depths that we've never seen before. And now we're starting to slowly kind of recover. Will we ever get to, the peak pandemic levels? I really do not think so. And I do not wish to ever be there, because I don't think any of us slept at that point in this industry.
Really was busy.
But the way we recruit CRAs has changed quite dramatically over the past decade, from the simple initial outreach, from the CRA academies that have always had, peaks and troughs, and organizations go through peaks of investing a load of their budget into CRA academies, entry-level CRAs, to then not doing it because of the financial downturns in the markets and so on. Also, when we look at how CRAs themselves perceive the job these days compared to how they used to, the newer generation coming into the workforce that has different expectations of the job than the previous generation did.
Yeah.
The salary and packages expectations. I was talking to a hiring manager just yesterday saying, one of the CRAs he interviewed wanted a particular type of car. Now, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have necessarily had that conversation. It was more around the job in itself. Now we're talking a lot more about the perks, about the flexibility of the job, about the opportunity for progression. And in my opinion, it is quite a split down the middle market between, there's a load of pharmacists, medical doctors from certain locations, biosciences graduates who really want that first step into the industry. And then on the other end, you have very experienced senior CRAs who are very fatigued with the travel, quite fatigued with the industry. They're looking for that next level up. And in the middle, you have the employers who are 90% of the time looking for that little unicorn, 2 to 3 years monitoring experience, happy to travel nationally, happy to spend 60 to 70% of time outside of the home, well organized, very good communicator, doesn't burn out, once a salary that's somewhere in the middle so they can still progress, and they don't want to be CTM in the next 4 years.
How realistic is that?
Very.
But yeah, actually, maybe regarding the question regarding that, so you have been doing that for now quite a long time. How do you select CRAs who you would like to interview? Like, what are the standouts in a CV or cover letter that you're looking for? Like, how people can get from this paper to actually interview?
Well, I will say the first step is find a recruiter that you like. There's many of us out there. You don't have to work with all the recruiters. You don't have to like all of the recruiters. I won't represent every candidate. Not every candidate will want to be represented by me. But as I was saying earlier, the industry is quite cyclical and it's got ups and downs. When it was a very candidate-heavy market, I've seen a lot of candidates burn their bridges with employers and recruiters. This goes for internal recruiters as well as external agency recruiters. We are all recruiters or talent acquisition at the end of the day, but we're also human, and we also have very lengthy memories when it comes to candidates who've done us wrong in the past. I can give you, a very good example. I saw the other day somebody posting on LinkedIn. He's been ghosted by recruiters. Now, I know this particular candidate very well. Me and pretty much any life sciences recruiter knows this candidate very well, because a few years back, he had a very specific tactic where he spoke to every single one of us, asked every single one of us who we worked with, what positions we had available, and then he would go and apply directly and cut us out of the process entirely. Now, obviously, as a recruiter, I get my bills paid by the companies that I work with, not by the candidate. So when a candidate does that and they go directly, they cut me out of the process, I've wasted my time. And he has done that quite a lot of times. And now he's obviously, seen the reverse of that coin where he is being ghosted. Not saying we are, vengeful, but we do have lengthy memories. I will say, though, a good recruiter will know who's hiring, will know the hiring managers, will obviously have a really good network of ClinOps managers, CRA line managers, will have a really good understanding on how to support you to grow your career, will have advice on how to write your CV, will have advice on how you can best interview, will have advice on who you can get in touch with or how you can highlight your skills best in an interview setting. However, if you apply, if you spray and pray, and if you apply to dozens of recruiters and you speak to dozens of recruiters and you lose track of your applications, we can't trust you. So when the client calls me and says, I'm looking for a CRA with rare disease experience, it's a really exciting trial, it's starting next month, I want to see your top 3 candidates. Realistically, I will probably have about 100 CRA candidates right now in my network that I could reach out to. But I will first reach out to those that I know are working primarily with me. I can trust they haven't already applied everywhere multiple times. I know they are being honest and open with me. And I feel confident in putting them forward because I think they will have a very good chance of getting the position. Now, that doesn't mean, only speak to one recruiter. As I say, vet your recruiter. There's enough of us out there.
For example, if I'm a new CRA coming into the industry, want to work for IQVIA or I don't know, maybe Icon, should I also look for recruiters or I should apply via the platforms that they have? Like what's the way within a big corporate? Like how should I do that?
Absolutely. I will say, however, don't spray and pray. I can give you another perfectly good example, so obviously I have the experience from both having worked with internal TA systems and externally through the agency. Just the other day, I saw an application for an internal position that I'm working on at the moment that had in the middle ATS keywords. Which was an interesting take. Now, I spoke to the candidates and I thought it was funny. So I asked, what was kind of the thought process behind it. So obviously, her reply was, well, you're speaking to me, right? So it worked. Well, no, actually, I manually looked at every single CV that applied for that position. And I decided by looking at what she has previously done, she will be a good candidate for the position I'm applying for. The ATS that I'm personally using right now does not automatically reject candidates, nor does it provide me with a grading system of who is best. As far as I know, in the industry right now, there isn't a single organization that automatically uses AI to reject and auto-reject people. You get auto-rejected because of automation. Automation has been here for at least a decade, which means literally when you apply, do you have the right to work? No. If we don't have the opportunity to offer sponsorship right now, yes, there will be an automated rejection. Another example, I am currently recruiting for a French-speaking position. I've had people who speak multiple languages, but French isn't one of them. They are rejected. So when you apply, ensure that you apply for the right position. Not necessarily for the position you wish you had. Or don't necessarily think, I know, I'm a great person. If only I can speak to the hiring manager, they'll see how great I am and they'll pick me over the other 300 candidates that fit the job description. Unfortunately, in this current climate, it won't happen. 4 or 5 years ago, in the peak pandemic level, absolutely it did happen. And we had so much more flexibility when it came to hiring. But if you are applying for a CRA2 oncology position that says, you need experience in phase 2-3, has national monitoring, you need a minimum of 6 months independent monitoring, then make sure that your application highlights the fact that you have independent monitoring experience, what therapeutic areas you've worked on, emphasizing on your oncology indications that you've worked on, and on the phase 2-3 that they particularly need, as well as your proximity to the site, if anything like that is mentioned, or your knowledge of the organization, for example.
That does make sense. And it's so interesting that CRAs, and we speak to many CRAs, or mostly, we both do from a different perspective, but through CRAConnect community, I speak to so many CRAs, and most of them tell me, Maria, I do fit every single point in that job description, I applied to hundreds. I remember one CRA showed me even an Excel file where she was just keeping track of all the applications that she would be applying to. And over 11 months, she applied to over 400 job applications as a CRA. Now, for whatever the reason, maybe it was the geography that she was in, maybe it was the time, the market, whatever it was. It just took her 11 months to get that job opportunity. So I think there must be a lot of mistakes that CRAs make when applying for their job applications. And one of them that you mentioned is the spray and pray technique. Don't do that. So that I'm taking as a takeaway. But are there any other common mistakes that you see and you've seen in your experience that CRAs so often do, and they don't realize that that will not get them to the positive outcome that they might want, which is the interview or the first step interview at least, and then get that chance to interview?
I have seen many candidates, for example, reapply for the same position over and over again with the same CV. If I'm an internal recruiter and I see somebody's been rejected 6-7 times previously, I'm less inclined to speak with them, realistically speaking. If I have over 100 applicants and one of them has been previously rejected 7 times, I'm probably not going to want to speak to them. That's the reality of this current market. Because we are so spoiled for choice in the hiring community right now, and because there are so many really great candidates applying for the same position, you really just have to, I'm a human too, and I have a limited amount of hours throughout the day as well. I'll give you another example. I posted a position the other day. This position had over 800 applications. I can't speak. As much as I would love to be able to give 800 people individual feedback, I can't do that. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't even have, the attention span to actually read and pay attention to 800 applications. So it could be, another good example. I spoke to a director of project management. She is a specialist in cardiovascular disease. I placed her years and years back. She's now looking for a new position after redundancy. So she is a true SME in cardiovascular. She hasn't been on the market in a number of years. And I asked, where she applied. She started listing, pretty much every single CRO I could possibly think of. Now, at this point, me as an external recruiter, I can no longer represent her because she's applied directly. So, there are rules of representations between external and internal recruiters. We can't, there is a certain respect we do have for each other. Believe it or not, recruiters do respect each other sometimes. But either way, there are contracts in place. So she's applied within the 6 months everywhere. I can't represent her anywhere. That is pretty much what's happening. But also, let's say I asked her, IQVIA, where have you applied? Well, I've applied for this project manager position. I said, well, you're a director. Why did you apply for a project manager position? Well, surely they see my CV and they will be able to think of something else that is suitable for me. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. In a company as large as IQVIA, Parexel, Fortrea, and so on, some of the very large corporations, normally you have a recruiter who is specifically focused on a therapy area. And they might not even know who recruits for the cardiovascular group. It might be somebody in a different team, in a different locations, or they might not have access in their internal system to see what their colleagues are doing. What they do know is that they have 50 applications for this one position. This person's 3 levels above and probably way too expensive and above budget. So they're going to be rejected for this position. And that's how they ended up being rejected over and over and over and over again. And then they end up being that candidate that's always been rejected. And many people probably don't even know why, because they hadn't actually spoken to somebody at this point.
But maybe my other question would be, so let's imagine that the person has gotten to the interview part. So they have been selected out of 300, 800 people. What would be the tips and tricks for that part? Because I think it's also quite scary part to get to. And what would be the tips and tricks from you? Like, what do you look for in a person during interview?
Absolutely. So majority of my interviews are quite informal. I like to understand what the personality fit is before anything else. For majority of the clients and the positions I've partnered on, we've always kind of taken that view that, the technical aspect can be taught, but if the personality and cultural fit and the want to is there, we can overlook other things. So I will say, depending on who you speak with, don't be condescending. That is quite a big one. I have had situations where obviously I'm not a medical doctor myself. I haven't actually worked in the industry myself. I just know how to hire a CRA, but I've never, done the job myself. However, that doesn't mean that I don't understand the industry jargon or I don't understand, the nitty-gritty of the job, because I do actually have a fairly good understanding of that. But there have been situations where candidates have spoken very condescendingly to me as if, I don't actually know anything. It's true, there are many recruiters out there. There are many who don't take the time to understand the industry they work in, which is why I earlier said, choose your recruiter, vet your recruiter. You need to interview a recruiter as much as they interview you, whether it's somebody externally, whether it's somebody internally, doesn't matter. You have to have that mutual communication lines open. So apart from, not being condescending, it depends on the team that you're applying for. It depends on the project that you're applying for. It depends on who you speak with, whether you're interviewing with HR, whether you're interviewing with a hiring manager, and whether it's a panel interview, whether it's something you've already done before. Obviously, if you are at a later stage or it's a face-to-face interview with a hiring manager, I always have situational examples at the back of my head. So, for example, one of my favorite things to always ask candidates in preparation is, give me an example of a difficult investigator at site and how you dealt with them. And any CRA would have had an example at hand, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
That's one example. So I would always say, obviously, a lot of people speak about the STAR methodology these days, right? So you speak about, the issue that you've identified, what plan you've come up with, how you have implemented your solution and what the outcome was. So you demonstrate the value that you brought to the patient, to the study, to the sponsor, to the team, to yourself, to your career, to the whole drug development process. I think as long as you are able to obviously communicate effectively and you don't waffle on or answer in 2 words. You obviously have to have that happy medium. But also it depends whether you are prepared by an external recruiter. So I always have, I spend 30 to 45 minutes with the candidates before they go and interview. And I tell them about my experience with this particular hiring manager, what personality they have, how they might be able to approach certain subjects, what is the best way to approach them like. Or they might have an internal recruiter who's going to tell them this is going to last this much. Do your prep on the company, know what they do. Why do you want to work there? An interview, and this is advice that I give both parties, both the candidate and the hiring manager. An interview is a two-way street. You interview the manager as much as the manager interviews you. And there's obviously the two sides of the coin here. You do have arrogant candidates who think, they are God's gift to monitoring and they're the best monitors in the world. Any company should be so lucky to have them. And you also have the hiring manager who think they work for the best company in the world. Anybody should be so lucky to work for them. And sometimes the two meet and it's never a pleasant situation.
Yeah, of course. You know that I'm stuck a little bit on this sentence that you had, that I would absolutely love to just go a little bit more into the details of it. You've said several times, and I love that you said it because I think many CRAs are not aware of it. You've said how you can actually build a two-way relationship between the CRA and the recruiter, right? The same way that the recruiter will vet the CRA as a candidate, you should, or at least can, vet the recruiter that you work with as well. But in my experience, or at least listening from the CRAs, for many CRAs, let's say junior level 1 and 2, most of their approaches is out perhaps a little bit of desperation of making that opportunity happen. Just take me, any recruiter, doesn't matter. I won't even look into who the recruiter is. I just know that a recruiter reached out to me, so I have an opportunity. You don't have that mentality of thinking, do I want to work with this recruiter? Can I build a relationship with this recruiter? Maybe this doesn't turn out the way I want now, but maybe in 5 months it does. So where do you think is this perhaps also lack of communication or lack of knowledge between what the CRA candidates, many think that is not even an option for them?
I think that comes with confidence and maturity in the job and in yourself as a candidate and as a person overall, to be honest. I know when I was a grad, gosh, I applied to dozens of positions myself. I didn't realize, that I was probably sending my CVs, and this is 15 years ago when we didn't even have AI and automation to do it on my behalf, but I applied for dozens and probably hundreds of applications before I heard back. So I absolutely understand that, especially those junior entering the industry right now, they will take any opportunity they can get. And it's probably, it is probably the sort of the right approach for them at the beginning. It is quite hard to differentiate yourself if you don't have any experience in the industry. If all you have is your degree, and that is it, and you've never been to site, you've never done an internship, you've never had the opportunity of a CRA entry-level position or a CRA academy, the way they do in Germany, for example, right? You can do that 6 months course for the CRA academy, that kind of gives you a little bit of experience. Then it is quite hard to make yourself seen and to make yourself heard. Now, realistically, at this point, agency recruiters are very unlikely to be able to help, because majority of the time our clients ask us for experienced CRAs, and that's why they pay us, realistically speaking and frankly speaking. So unfortunately, a lot of agency recruiters won't be able to come back to the junior CRAs or those seeking the entry-level positions. I will say, I try my best to make time and speak to as many people as possible, but I also have to prioritize those that, I know my clients will want to speak with. That is the reality of the day-to-day interactions in this industry. But things like, academies, internships, opportunities at job fairs where you go and meet the internal hiring teams of certain organizations, industry events where you have conferences, you have get-together, you have networking opportunities. These are absolutely the best things to get yourself noticed. And I'll give you a very good example. I was at a symposium in November in Bucharest, and a pharmacist came up to me and said, I would like to be a CRA. How do I get to be a CRA? She pretty much cornered me at lunchtime, to be honest.
Make it happen.
But I couldn't get away. I thought that was fantastic. She was obviously a really fresh grad. She literally just graduated, but she came to an industry conference straight away and said, I want to be a CRA. How do I make it happen? Who do I speak to in this room? You're a recruiter, I heard. Who do you know? Who do you think I should go up to and speak with and introduce myself? And that was, I'm pretty sure she's now got an opportunity as an entry-level CRA. So that's the perfect example, be proactive. Sending a dozen CVs and emails doesn't necessarily work. Getting the, I'm interested, have you got a job open, unfortunately doesn't work. I get so many messages from different candidates, and this goes for all levels, that quite literally message me on LinkedIn and say, I'm open for a job. What do you have? I don't have the time to do that for you. Be proactive.
Totally. And so often candidates don't even look. I get those types of messages every day, and most of the time I cannot do anything with it. Even though you try to respond to every message and give a feedback to every message, you just can't realistically. When the number of messages and you don't want to use an automation, then you will just have to leave some of them unanswered. Theodora, I want to wrap up maybe with one question that both Annalisa and I found very interesting, and we've been discussing a lot about. One of our previous episodes is some observations that we had on the market and how the CRA role is changing and where is it going, which is just from our own observations of working within this industry. But I would love to know from the perspective of CRA recruitment, where do you see perhaps the role or the recruitment of this role evolving in the next, let's say, few years or just near future?
Again, I will say the word cyclical. And again, I think, we went through a stage of seeing the CRA kind of do everything, and then the CRA getting siloed to just do the monitoring and reporting side. And then there is a separate startup group, and then there's a separate feasibility group, and a separate group for central monitoring and so on. And some companies are kind of going back to the basics, where the CRA again kind of gets to have that accountability for more than just the site monitoring piece. They get to have the ownership of the client relationship if they're from the CRO side, or they get the opportunity to have more of the ownership with the site, with the patient, and so on. Have exposure to more than just the pure monitoring. And I think this is probably, one of the biggest frustrations of CRAs that I've spoken with over the years, probably over the past decade or so. Obviously, we've had at one point that separation of the CRA and the in-house CRA and the risk-based monitoring and the study feasibility and startup. And I think we are starting to see some companies kind of revert back to the model where the CRA does get to do a little bit more. And I think obviously that supports their career, gives them a little bit more flexibility, and I guess, protects people from burnout, really. Which is a real big part of the conversation in the industry, right? CRA burnout is a real issue. I think regardless of whether you speak to a CRA who started monitoring this month or a CRA who started monitoring a decade ago, everybody will talk to you about burnouts and excessive monitoring and excessive paperwork, regardless of the automation and AI that we've all implemented in our day-to-day, right? But I do think we are seeing a more diversified approach to the CRA position itself. There's obviously more decentralized monitoring elements that are being implemented. We see the rise of DCT. I don't think was just a pandemic trend. We had DCT elements before the pandemic. We will continue to see DCT elements of it, and obviously that's so important to the patient retention piece. That again, the patient at the heart of everything that we do in the industry. There are people out there who seem to think that monitoring as we know it will no longer be. But I disagree profoundly with that idea. I think we live in a world that has obviously adopted AI and automation very quickly, in theory. But I do believe we're almost doing a very fast 360 where we're going back to, we really want to see people face to face. We really want to have that human touch and that human interaction again. I know I don't want to just interview my candidates online without seeing them, without speaking to them, without hearing their voice. I know my hiring managers don't want to hire people without seeing them, without hearing them, without speaking to them. And similarly, patients don't want to be part of trials where it's faceless and it's all done on an app, right? So I think actually the CRA will continue to be at the heart of clinical operations and the drug development process. And I think more than ever, we need to look after our CRAs and protect them against burnout.
I cannot agree more with that.
I think it really on spot, Theodora. Really love that analog.
Maybe just as a wrap-up thought of so many CRAs who I know are listening, and so many are worried about losing their jobs in the next 2 to 3 years. And many are thinking, maybe I should make a shift in my career towards other roles that I might find less interesting and exciting, but just because I want certain safety that I will still have a job in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think this uncertainty that might come because we're embracing AI and we're hearing about automated monitoring. And yes, it can be that in the future, that checkbox that we do almost as a robot will be done by the system itself. Great, because it takes away that maybe not so exciting or tiresome or simply boring activity or part of the CRA, and it leaves you with more on the human side, more on the critical thinking, more that judgment, more that aspects that humans have that machines and AI are not there, at least yet. And I think they might never be able to substitute that. And I even see it as an exciting part, because if it allows me then to use my critical thinking and then my human brain, and hopefully my brain keeps evolving rather than just clicking on a checkbox and seeing that little check in green. Great. I actually find it very, very exciting. Theodora, thank you so much for so many insights that you gave us today. I think we can all leave listening to or watching the podcast with at least one thought takeaway, which for me has absolutely been stop spraying and praying, because I'm stuck with that sentence. I know, but it is so true. It's so true. When you see 800 applicants to a position, it's because those 800 have applied to 800 more applications. So that is one of the main problems that we have today. But you've had so many other gold material in this episode that I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us and sharing your expertise. And for everyone who's listening or watching, I hope you find this exciting, and I hope you found value in listening to this episode. And as always, if you want to be notified of the next episodes, make sure that you like or you follow the podcast. And then I see you all at the next episode. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.